This is Market Pathways, your premium guide to global medical device regulation, reimbursement, and policy. Become a part of the global MedTech community at mystrategist.com.
Hello, welcome to the Market Pathways podcast. My name is David Filmore, editor of Market Pathways. Today on the podcast, my recent conversation with Scott Whitaker, president and CEO of AdvaMed. AdvaMed has its massive MedTech Conference coming up in San Diego, first week of October. We'll talk a little bit about that and AdvaMed and its predecessor organization's 50th anniversary representing industry in DC. Scott and I dig into some policy details, challenges with tariffs, FDA, upcoming MDUFA talks, CMS coverage issues, and what's happening in Congress. Finally, Scott's message for industry in these contentious times. Give it a listen. Here's me and Scott Whitaker.
Hey, Scott. Welcome to the podcast. Nice to talk to you again.
Good to see you, David, and it's good to be on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we run into each other once in a while, including a prior podcast, and nice to have you back. This time around, we're doing this just a couple of weeks shy of the MedTech Conference. I know you guys are, obviously that's the annual gathering, big event for the industry every year. This year in San Diego, kind of place for everyone to get together. I know I do it just about every year. Most years I'll be there this year. Kind of stressful times for you in terms of getting that juggernaut off the ground, or you just kind of relish the public stage? What are the vibes from?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for coming for so many years, David. It's I think it's an important event for everybody who's in MedTech, and over the course of my 10 years, it continues to grow right each year. And it's an interesting event. It's a trade show type event, but it's also small enough that most of the CEOs, the vast majority of our CEOs who come, are very accessible, very engaged. They're doing panel sessions, they're having conversations, they're doing meetings, they're walking the exhibit floor. And so it's a unique event. And, it's a little stressful for the team as we try to hit our numbers every year and make sure we're continuing to grow. But mostly it's a celebration of the industry. And that part of it, I think everyone really enjoys. But anytime you're running a trade association, the excitement builds toward the event, and then you're kind of excited when it's over too. So both.
I hear you. Speaking of celebration, something else I've noticed. I know it's not only about the meeting, but it's kind of AdvaMed in general. 50th year celebration, which I know includes both, AdvaMed and the predecessor organization. It's kind of interesting to me thinking about that. That'd be, I guess, 1975. So, right when regulations are maybe of devices are beginning to be really discussion ratcheting up, getting into the 1976 medical device amendment. So like a time of change, but it seems like, it's always an important time of change back then and now.
Yeah.
But I mean, just kind of thinking about historically, like, what are the kind of enduring issues? What are some of the issues that you think, that 1975 director, whoever that was, starting at HIMA, I believe the organization was,
right.
Where do you share in terms of some of the challenges you face when it comes to the advocating, communicating, educating to policymakers, to others about MedTech? What are some of those things that you think have been kind of lasting in a historic way?
That's an interesting question and a great question. I think if you look back at where we were in 1975, you mentioned the 76 Act, right? Just coming together. There had been regulation of FDA of medical devices before that, but it wasn't particularly clear and precise as exactly what the pathway was. And I think if you look back at the person who was running it in 75, he was inheriting kind of a new regulatory paradigm, right? Which would have been challenging in some ways and difficult in some ways as well. But in many ways, the issue set hasn't changed that much. If you look at sort of the big buckets of challenge we face, at least domestically in the United States, it's about having a clear and transparent and predictable regulatory pathway so companies know how to get through the FDA process and to approval. And then it's about what the reimbursement systems look like and how you can get your product to patients and paid for in the system. And it's still about tax incentives and tax policy, right, to help your companies grow and prosper. And to some degree, and maybe a little different now, but about capital formation, which is tax related as well, and some of the investment challenges companies continue to have. So I think if you think of those four big buckets, The details in each one of those have changed and evolved, but they're still sort of the same big issues, right? The sort of same big regulatory, payment, and tax-related issues that we've always dealt with. But with every administration, with every Congress, as the industry has evolved, the details of those change a little bit, And it's interesting, we're heading into the next round of MDUFA now, right? So we're heading into MDUFA 6 and beginning those conversations about what the next phase of regulation looks like. So that's always an exciting thing for us to engage in as well. So
yeah, a lot. And you're almost I think 10 years, right? Maybe next year be
right,
down 10 years.
right.
So it seems like, I don't know, maybe it's recency bias, but of the 5 decades, yours might be the most chaotic. I don't know. Seems like in terms of the advent, you got a global pandemic, you got the advent of AI, you got whatever the current political instabilities are, that obvious, just your sense of like these massive macro world changing issues that you're facing, how does that sort of impact your approach to the job? Or to kind of put it another way, what would be most unrecognizable to that 1975 director to what your job is today? What's the modern challenge?
Yeah. So I would say 2 things. I think the political process has changed in DC. It's different than it was in 1975 and 1976. I'm not saying it's better or it's worse. I think everyone will have an opinion on that, but it's certainly very, very different. How you engage, how you message, how you have conversations, where the control and the power is, right? That's a little bit different probably as well. So there's been some change there, but it has to be the innovation leading to AI and all the connected care from a technology standpoint that is the most dramatic change from 1975. And we've talked about this a little bit before, I think, David. I think it's the speed of innovation, right? But then the actual product development as well. I think if you go back to let's use 1976 as a great example, the first year FDA began to regulate products. If you had said to my predecessor who was leading the organization at the time that in diabetes care, let's use that as an example, right? That there would be a continuous glucose monitor that talked to an insulin pump that regulated your blood sugar and your insulin levels throughout the course of the day, in many ways automatically, right? They would have gone, wow, that's mind-blowing, right? If you had said there's going to be a pacemaker that's leadless and you can put it in a very easy way and manage it very well without a large connection, they would have gone, wow, that's really hard to believe. I think if you thinking about cardiovascular surgeries, right? If you had talked about the process, TAVR-related process that you now use to replace a valve compared to an open heart surgery that would have occurred in 1975, 1976, dramatic change. Think of imaging, right? And the precision with which you're able to diagnose. You think of IVDs and LDTs and all the diagnostic tools that we have as now. The fundamentals of it are the same, right? The diseases you're trying to solve, right, or deal with are the same. But boy, the technologies are so much better in a way that really enhances patients' lives. And I think that would be shocking in 1975, but today it's incredibly exciting. So,
yeah, and all those things bring up very practical, things you have to respond to. They bring up so many complications when it comes to policy making and when it comes to like how do you consider the communication between devices and whatnot. So yeah, no, point taken. So let's zoom. I mean, we're talking modern, but we're also talking history. Let's zoom up to the present in terms of your, the day-to-day. Like, just wanted to get at, I mean, my main day-to-day job is, really paying attention to the policy issues impacting MedTech, the, regulatory and market access, et cetera, issues that are impacting, how companies get to the market. But I'm curious, like, what's on the minds? I mean, many things, I'm sure, but what's on the minds of the CEOs of, your membership? What is the, like, you have a board meeting, let's say you had it today, or whenever you had your most recent board meeting, what is the issue or the maybe handful of issues that are just absolutely capturing in terms of anxiety? I mean, I know there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of excitement, but there's also, I'm sure, plenty of concern, anxiety. That's what they call AdvaMed in for, right? To kind of go talk to people about that stuff. So what is the issue or issues that is really, the top line, the thing that's really capturing when you're meeting with your members?
Yeah, it's still tariffs, right? And it kind of has been since April 2nd. January 1, I don't think we anticipated the degree to which that would be the top issue or the disruption that it might cause, but that's still front of mind. I think most companies are understanding better how to deal with them in the short term. I still think there's a lot of concern over the impact of tariffs over the long term, right? And how that impacts our supply chains. How do we need to adjust for that and accommodate for it? What do the next 10 years look like relative to where you manufacture, how you manufacture, where you ship? The price point issue, it's unavoidable, right? I mean, if tariffs are 15% or if they're 25% or 50%, you can't just eat all that, right? I mean, it's just impossible to do. So how do you deal with that? And I think we all understand, I think what the objective is here and what the president's trying to achieve. And there are maybe different versions of that or different levels to that. But mostly we just want to keep them as low as possible and as predictable as possible. And then business can kind of adjust to that and deal with it as best we can. But when you're dealing with 15% and then next month it goes to 50, that's really a challenging business environment, right? And how long is it going to stay there, or is it going to go back down? Also kind of challenging. So, and I understand what he's doing. I mean, he's using them as leverage in broader trade discussions and negotiations. I understand that. We respect that. But we've had a lot of conversations with his team, and we're going to continue that, David, and hopefully by the end of the year get some more certainty and clarity about it. I think for most of our companies, everywhere there's a tariff is a challenge, but different countries represent different challenges. And right now we're very squarely focused on Europe, right? Is there a way to lower that tariff burden in some way? Can we eliminate that and get back to the 0 for 0 model that existed prior to the tariffs going into effect? And those conversations are ongoing. It's been a positive dialogue, but we haven't quite gotten to where we'd like to be. But I'm still hopeful that we can get there by the end of the year. So tariffs, to your question, it's still the hottest one, but there are a lot of other ones as well.
Sure, and we'll get to some. And obviously, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's just it's a cross-board impact. I know there's some legal muddle there too. I mean, that could have an impact in terms of what the
right.
legal decisions on tariffs.
Right.
Stuff, so I assume
yeah, big decision by the Supreme Court coming up, right? And it'd be nice if that gets resolved before the end of the year. I'm not sure it will, but at least it'll be heard before the end of the year, and you'll have a better sense of where it's going. And so that hopefully will bring some clarity. But David, even after the Supreme Court rules, there are still other tools that they can use, right? There are 3 or 4 different tools that they have at their disposal other than IEEPA to try to impose tariffs in some form. So even with a ruling there, I'm not sure it brings entire certainty and clarity going forward.
So for the moment, it's continue or improve productive conversations with the administration, work with maybe your European counterparts. I know MedTech Europe has been doing a lot on the other end. That's kind of where you're at.
That's right, and Europe has been doing a lot, and the conversations are still ongoing between the two countries, right? These framework agreements aren't settled ever, it doesn't feel like. And in fact, we were having conversations with folks over there just this week talking about what's next, right? And they're kind of working through sort of sector by sector, and we're top of the list for them, right? As to a sector that should be carved out, or at least a portion of our sector. So we'll continue to do that, and we're not going to let up until we get where we want to be.
Is there, like you said, companies are dealing with it in the short term? I mean, is there, since like our adjustment of supply chain approaches and things like that in response in a either short-term or long-term way where you're sourcing stuff from? Is that the type of stuff that's happening in the industry right now?
It's happening, and it sort of depends on the product that you have. It depends on how many component parts that you have that are part of the product, where you finish it, where you build it, right? Those things are all different for everyone. In Mexico, we have the ability to get exemptions from the tariffs under USMCA. So that provided some nice relief. So if you're manufacturing primarily in Mexico and shipping in the United States, that's steady, right? But I think the good news is, since the pandemic, companies have done a lot to either reshore or nearshore much of the product that's coming into the United States. And so looking back, we're glad that we did that. You didn't want to have to go through the pandemic to get there, but in many ways, companies made some adjustments there that has made dealing with this a bit easier, right? It's not easy, don't misunderstand me, but a bit easier when you're closer to shore. But there's still a lot of challenges. And David, you know this industry really, really well. Depending on what the product is and how complex the product is and where your supplies come from, in some cases, there's just nothing you can do about it. You're only getting that from one location, one supplier. You're just going to have to deal with it. And that's what we're trying to say to the administration. Give us a little bit of break when there's no ability to make any adjustment to get things back to the United States.
Right. So part of the broader argument related to tariffs, it fits into a broader point, which is, differentiating, pointing out like what MedTech is, specifically the needs of MedTech when it comes to supply chain are very particular to MedTech, but more broadly, MedTech is its own industry. I think we talked a number of months ago before the administration, I think at one of our Innovation Summit meetings about, the opportunity and the need also to paint, educate MedTech, make it clear that MedTech is a problem solver, a cost saver, as for its own purpose, and also maybe to distinguish from some other other industries in healthcare in terms of where targets might be versus not, and that sort of stuff when it comes to policy making. Where do you think that is when in your communications with the administration, et cetera, policymakers? Do you feel you've been able to make that point? I mean, tariffs is a case where they haven't necessarily distinguished industries, but maybe in other areas, maybe they have. So, what's your sense of that overall?
Yeah, listen, almost every meeting I go into, whether it's with the administration or with folks on the Hill, I kind of lead with that story, right? We're different, we're unique, we have a specific story to tell. I often say, David, if you go into a hospital, everything essentially in the hospital, other than the bricks and mortar and the people, is essentially MedTech, right? That's who we are. So I try to help people understand that. I think oftentimes people see the device industry through the device that they know, but not the other thousands of devices that exist in a hospital, right? And so that education process is ongoing. It's been received quite well, to be honest with you. I think we have really good conversations, and I think a lot of eyes have been opened in the first 6-9 months of this administration to better understand us, and also to differentiate us from others, particularly in the healthcare industry, right? There aren't only just technology differences between what we do and what others in the industry do, but the way we do it, the way our products are priced, the way our products are manufactured, the way we negotiate, it's all very, very different. The environment, the competitive environment of MedTech is very, very different than others in the healthcare industry. And so that uniqueness argument is important to us. And we've done that with the White House. We do it with CMS and with FDA and every regulatory agency we deal with. And it does help us explain why certain policies matter more to us than perhaps they do others. So
right. And do you think it's borne fruit in small ways? I mean, it seems like
I do. And listen, on the tariff discussion, right? It's compelling, but that's not the point from their perspective, right? So we have to continue making that case. But when you talk to new leadership at HHS, when you talk to new leadership at CMS and FDA and the other agencies under that HHS umbrella, that they do understand us, and they do understand us quite well, right? You've got two docs in those two positions now, FDA and CMS, both of which who have a really good understanding and a growing understanding of the uniqueness and the value that we provide to the healthcare system. So it's being very, very well received. And I think it will be borne out, David, in policy coming forward. We'll have to wait and see, because this town doesn't move quickly on anything, right? So, but we feel like we're trending in the right direction on some of the big issues.
Right. No, well, for instance, FDA put up their big approach to sort of shut down drug advertising. It doesn't seem like that's really focused on drugs, right? And not as much on devices. So is that
not on us? Yeah, I think that's one example. I think when we head into the user fee discussion, it'll be another example. I think if you look at the progress we've made on breakthrough technologies, I think that's another example. You can LCDs, NCDs, right? We're making progress on all of those fronts. And the same argument to set up the discussion about policy is resonating. So,
got it. So FDA, I mentioned them. We've mentioned MDUFA a few times also. Obviously, always an important issue. I mean, it's been basically the federal workforce in general. It's been a pretty chaotic. I'll use that word chaotic again. A chaotic year.
Right.
For reasons I think most listeners would know, just in terms of the personnel, the reductions in force, the back and forth bringing some people back, the retirements, et cetera.
Right.
What's your sense of the level of sort of equilibrium or settled nature in terms of how things are operating at FDA right now, particularly on the device side, obviously,
Yeah,
since that's what
yeah.
we're focusing on. Kind of, is it reached some sense of focus and not as unstable? Are there any lingering gaps and basic stuff that would have normally happened that maybe like, is that happening right now? Or where are the question marks? Where's the confidence in terms of what's happening at FDA right now in terms of resources
Yeah.
and responsibility?
I think the big question marks are the long-term impact of the reductions in force. I have not seen a lot of short-term impact, right? And I think in many ways that's a credit to Commissioner McCary for leaving Michelle Tarver in her job, right? Others have kind of been moved out. So with her staying there, it brings a level of certainty and continuity, I think, to the Center for Devices and Regulatory Health, and that has been very helpful to us, I think. I'll give them credit when they initially made those, massive cuts. When we raised the concerns, they reacted pretty quickly and made sure that the people who were in the reviewer jobs were back in their jobs. Not everyone, because some people chose to leave, and it was a little choppy for a while, as I like to say. But most of them are back, right? And they're continuing, it looks like, to meet the targets that they set. So I would say it was certainly disruptive. I wouldn't characterize it as particularly helpful, but it feels like in the short term, we're okay. Now, over the long term, does that stay? We'll have to wait and see. But we'll continue to track everything. You've seen in some areas, some of the OHTs are performing better than others relative to the goals that we set in MDUFA 5. I don't know if I could answer the question as to why is that yet, but it's part of what we're probing as we look to MDUFA 6, right? Why are some performing better than others? Is it a staffing issue? Is it a great staff or a poor staff issue? Or are there other complications that we need to be aware of? Because we really need to get all the OHTs performing at the exceptional level if we can.
Right. I mean, some has obviously been like psychologically impact on the people at FDA. I mean, a lot of stuff. I mean, you feel in general, though, your interactions with your companies, they're most people that are there right now are focused on the mission, not getting
I mean, I don't want to be overly optimistic or naive about it either, David, right? It's like it's not the way we would like it to have gone down, right? But it is what it is, right? And once it is what it is, you have to work with the FDA to try to find the best path forward. And by and large, it feels like the reviewers have continued to do a very good job and the engagement stays high. That doesn't mean there haven't been exceptions to that, right? There have been areas of challenge. There have been areas of concern. There have been delays. But overall, has it been, has it set us way back? No, it would have been better if we hadn't gone through it, but it's where we are. So we just keep fighting for improvement day after day.
And you've mentioned MDUFA a few times. Of course, that's a user fee program that's going to expire to 2027, and you just kind of public kickoff just happened for the next round of negotiations last month. It seems like AdvaMed representatives at that meeting, and the message I sort of got was we're somewhat of a status quo, not in terms of development of devices, but in terms of a program that is is working. We don't need to make any big changes here. We don't need massive new investments. We don't need this. You get a sense that that's kind of going to be a reasonable place to be in these conversations. Do you expect any surprises? I mean, it's always hard to tell with these things because they do sometimes get into the details. And this year, it's even like I was questioning whether the administration was going to be into user fees at all. So, what's your sense of how that's going to move forward?
My sense is it will settle out over the course of the next couple of months. I think FDA is on a quick timeline to get it wrapped up. I think that's a good sign. They don't want to protracted negotiation, and we don't either. I think, in talking to the commissioner and others, I think folks feel like the fundamental structure of MDUFA 5 still feels basically right. So we're going to work off that as the basic model. That's a good thing. I think everyone agrees there are other areas of performance that can improve, and we're focused on how do we do that. We gave such a meaningful increase financially last time around. I don't think you need to see that level of increase again, right? So to your point, steady state, that's probably a good way to think about it. We're open to conversations with FDA about new programs, new things that they want to do. We'll learn that through the negotiation. I can't speak to that yet. I don't know what they are. there's always a new idea or maybe a few new ideas we have to discuss and work through. But I'm pretty optimistic that you're not going to see much of a change to the basic model that exists, and that the performance will continue as it has for the next 5 years.
Right. So, but if the agency comes to us like, we need this new thing that's going to cost this amount, yeah, a big spike in user fees, that's the type of thing that will then cause some pushback.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate a big spike in user fees, right? So that's certainly not the way I'm thinking about it today. But I also don't want to get ahead of the negotiations, to be fair, and I don't want to try to forecast something. But I mean, my general sense is from our members that the program's functioning well. Let's make sure it continues to function well. And where there are need for changes, let's have the conversation. But we're not prepared to forecast what that will look like yet.
Okay, so overall, in summary, it sounds like FDA, it sounds like things at the moment are operating sort of to normal, but some tough stuff happened this year. Well, what does that mean for the long term? But in terms of, stick with the user fees, that's worked with us so far, and we're happy with.
I think, and I think that's where the commissioner is as well, right? So I haven't heard anything that would suggest dramatic change. So,
okay. Well, the other side of the coin, of course, always, and speaking of coins, is reimbursement, and that's obviously something. I mean, that's a constant focus of gotten more and more of a focus as the FDA system has become more transparent and predictable, but the Medicare process, CMS process, and other reimbursement related processes are harder to get through for companies and more complicated. I know there's been some, we'll talk about it, there's been some hearings this week that we're talking in September just on some of these issues. But just from a CMS standpoint, before we get, on an agency level, where does that, has it been a stable year, first of all, just saying, because we were just talking about FDA, and is CMS faced any of those same sort of resource issues, do you feel like? Has it been a consistent experience with CMS, which I know wasn't at the same place anyway as it was.
Yeah, right.
FDA, but how would you overall sort of the status with industry's engagement with CMS and companies individual in terms of working through coverage, coding, payment issues, et cetera?
Yeah. It they're so different, the two agencies. They have a similar mission, right, in that they're dealing with devices and medical technologies, but they're so different in the way they function and how they're staffed. So I would say it's been less disruptive from a staffing level at CMS than it was at FDA initially.
Hey, have you heard of Market Pathways? Market Pathways provides the most in-depth analysis you'll find of the changes happening in medical device regulation and reimbursement every day. They address the complexity in regulatory affairs and beyond by helping you digest and contextualize technical topics like Medicare and MDR. Visit mystrategist.com/trial today to start your free 5-day trial to Market Pathways. Again, that's mystrategist.com/trial for 5 days of online access.
But it feels like they have really solid leadership at the top, and Dr. Oz has been able to steady that ship. You're seeing some changes now, and I feel pretty good about under his leadership that he'll replace people who have left with people who are as good or better going forward and understand the industry well. And so I'll try to remain optimistic about that. I mentioned this earlier, but it's always helpful when you have a CMS administrator who understands the industry the way Dr. Oz does, right? It's just different, right? That's a unique agency. At the end of the day, they're an insurer, right? And what they do is make determinations on what products should be covered and how much you should pay. That's an oversimplification of it. But having someone at the top of that agency that understands the value of innovation, the value of medical technologies, the value of investing early to save money over the long term and lower the cost burden, particularly in chronic disease, I think that's a very good thing. And so it gives me comfort knowing he's there because I think he understands as well, right? He's a patent holder too, by the way, right? And sure. He's been involved in the industry as a surgeon and as an inventor. So it is very unique. And so we're pleased with that. I think there are two issues with staffing at CMS from my perspective. The first is, do they have enough to deal with the speed of innovation? And I think that's an open question that we're discussing that needs to be solved for. And then the second question are they organized correctly? in order to deal with the innovation that's coming through CMS? And that's an open question too. Both of those conversations are ongoing with the administration now. And I wouldn't expect those to be resolved necessarily this year, right? But we're working with them on that going forward. So probably less disruptive than FDA, at least from the outside, and more of a steady state, but that steady state needs to improve. So,
Right.
yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned the balance. I mean, the focus on, Dr. Oz having the innovation background, and obviously the big focus policy-wise, specifically top line on the reimbursement side. I know there's many issues, obviously, but is
Yeah.
streamlining coverage for innovative new devices, FDA breakthrough devices, et
Right.
cetera. But, how much is that? Do you feel like that approach, because obviously that really took a big jump forward last Trump administration with the MCIT
Right.
policy. So that is a focus. At the same time, the other thing I've noticed is a lot of focus on things like fraud and abuse, which maybe sometimes goes the opposite direction in terms of like blocking access in some ways with the idea of
Yeah.
wanting to prior authorization,
Right.
things like that. Is that balance between the sort of innovation focus and sort of maybe I'll just call it the fraud and abuse, which maybe, like I said, I think can go the opposite direction. Is that how do you feel overall in terms of how that's coming out in terms of policy development at
Yeah, I would say the balance is in favor of innovation right now. That's the way I would characterize it. Now the proof will be in the next 3.5 years, right? Does that actually bear fruit? But at least in conversations, the balance is a favorable environment for innovation in medical technology, and I think that's a good thing. In the fraud and abuse space, you're right. It does create some complications. Not because of anything that the industry is doing from a fraudulent or abusive standpoint, but how others might be abusing the system, right? And then that might flow over into conversations or policies that make things complicated. When the motive is right, the policy doesn't always correctly address it. So we have to be very aware of that. But this is a clean industry. We have the AdvaMed Code of Ethics that we follow. We understand the importance of great products, safe products, effective products to patients. And we want to make sure the program is Medicare and Medicaid are as free of fraud and abuse as possible, right? But it's also important that folks don't misunderstand what that means and pass policies that impact our ability to innovate. So,
right. So getting to that more specific issue of like coverage for
yeah.
Innovative devices, obviously, that's something that's, currently we have in practice the regulatory program, the TCET, transitional coverage for emerging technologies, which I know,
Yeah.
is sort of a streamlined NCD process.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of push to, get back to something that's more of automatic, or get to something, not really back, but
Right.
to more automatic coverage, particularly for, FDA breakthrough devices that are then authorized by the agency, and give them a time to really just get on the market, referencing the whole Valley of Death challenge, et cetera,
Right.
get on there, collect evidence. I know working on that with CMS to some extent, certainly on the Hill working on that. We're talking on September 18th, and just yesterday, I know Ways and Means Committee put through a bill that would sort of create this type of program. There's a hearing today on the Hill, in the House, another one. So, where does that stand in terms of moving forward on that issue, whether legislatively or in the administrative branch?
Yeah, so very positive momentum, I would say. And it was really encouraging actually yesterday, David, when the Ways and Means Committee passed it, because the vote moved from a mostly partisan vote in the past to a 38-3 vote that was overwhelmingly in support of the same basic bill, right, that passed last time around. So what we've seen is members of both parties now recognizing the value of innovation in the healthcare system from the MedTech side, right? And so that was very, very encouraging. And I was surprised by it, to be honest with you. I thought we would get a bipartisan vote. I just didn't think it would be that big. So we'll see what happens today in the hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee, but I think that trend is very positive as well. So you have Congress moving something, and I think that's going to make its way through the House. You have a Senate bill, by the way, that's just as good, if not better, than the one that passed the House. And then you've heard directly from Commissioner McCary, and also Dr. Oz, of their support for the same concept. So when you put all those pieces together, can't help but be encouraged, right? If it's not done legislatively, I think it's going to get done from a regulatory standpoint. And we may, frankly, end up with both, which would be even more powerful, right? A strong regulatory package from CMS that is a result of a great legislative bill that came through as well. So I think it's a very positive sign and an encouraging trend right now. I've been in Washington way too long, as I like to say, so I don't get too optimistic over too much until a pen is on the paper and they've signed something. So we'll wait and see, right? Issues unrelated to MedTech can often derail issues totally related to MedTech. We hope that's not the case, but encouraged about where we are today.
Right. So legislatively, but that of course assumes things go through Congress in general, like where, that's always an assumption. Yeah. How is that? Is that you feel like that, the political process is, any year one could say we're in tough times, but, I think it's fair to say we're in a very, challenging, polarized isn't even the word anymore, I would say. So do you have a lot of optimism for just basic policy making when it comes to getting legislation through, even if it's substantive stuff that's bipartisan, but that doesn't bipartisan in a committee level doesn't always translate to
that's right. No, you're right, because other things can complicate it. So on the policy itself, I am very optimistic, right, that it will get done. On the process piece, I'm less optimistic. But the one thing we talk about this a lot inside DC and outside DC, it feels like the town is entirely dysfunctional and nothing gets done. I think in large part that's true, right? But it's also true because big things don't get done anymore, outside the reconciliation process. But if you go back and look at the last Congress or even the previous 2 or 3 Congresses, there are a lot of things that get done that are below the radar screen, right? That people don't talk about because they're not politically all that important necessarily. And I would put this bill in that category, right? As a piece of legislation, if it has broad bipartisan support, could easily slide into another bill and get done in the fall of this year. So that's what gets done is things that have broad bipartisan support and are below the political radar screen. That seems to fit the test relative to at least the breakthrough legislation. So am I optimistic? More so than I was last year. I do feel like we're going to get there, David. I really do.
And I assume you put other bills like eventual user fee reauthorization and things like that in the same bucket.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Maybe an NCD bill, maybe an LCD bill, maybe some other payment reforms can get passed as well. So there's a bucket of activities that I think we're focused on, even outside of the payment space.
Okay. Well, let's loop back around and talk. We talked about the this conference coming up that is an important meeting place for industry. How does this all loop into how does this meeting kind of help contribute to your advocacy on all these issues we've been talking about? Is this like an actual part of that? Is this just to? Obviously, you get some income for this too, but how does this play into the sort of goals of the organization in terms of advocating for some of these issues on FDA, CMS, tariffs, et cetera?
Yeah, so I'll give you one really good example of that, which is the FDA town hall meeting that we will do on Wednesday, right? Which is when the leader of CDRH, in this case, Michelle Tarver, will be there, right, along with her senior team, where we can have a dialogue about policies that matter to us and ask them questions about some of the issues that we see there. So that type of dialogue really enhances our ability to move things from a regulatory standpoint. I think from a state-based advocacy standpoint, every time we're in a state and we get exposure to local legislators, governors, and politicians in that state, this year it's California, obviously, even the local politicians in San Diego, it gives us a chance to talk about issues that might be unique to that state. And so we do advance things. It gives us an opportunity to talk to our members as well, David, and share the progress we're making on some issues, educate them on that, and then call for action, right? And have them come to DC and help us make the case going forward. So that's very valuable. And then to me, I said this at the beginning, in many ways, it's just an opportunity to celebrate who we are as an industry and tell the story of MedTech in a way that not everyone understands. You mentioned this in your question earlier about our advocacy in DC, right? The images that come from a conference like this, the conversations the video clips that come from a conference like this are very helpful to us on the advocacy front. And now with social media, the ability to share all that information and target certain videos to certain people on LinkedIn or X or what other platform, it really enhances our ability to be effective. So across the board, it's more indirect than the sort of the direct lobbying and work that you do in DC, but it's an important part of our advocacy.
Yeah. One thing I think about is when you say industry and telling the story, I mean, obviously it's a very, a lot of parts to the industry, and, a lot of the device industry in particular, as we, talk about differentiating it, one thing that makes it different is it's a big tent of technologies and business types. You guys have kind of displayed that with, even creating your new divisions and, medical imaging, digital health diagnostics, startups. And so how does it, I mean, the microcosm of this conference and bringing all those together into a conference. So how do you make sure you're meeting all the needs and displaying all those different elements, but also, and that kind of gets to broader, how do you run the organization? We have all these different, because, they have some of the same, obviously, goals, but of course, the reason why you even create different divisions because they have some distinct ways of need. So how does that, how big of a challenge is that when it comes to the meeting and when it comes to the broader organization of AdvaMed? And, how do you think of that?
Yeah, I haven't found it as a challenge, right? To me, I've just view it as an opportunity, right? The bigger the tent, the better the story to tell about the value we provide to the healthcare system more broadly, right? And we've organized in a way inside of AdvaMed that makes it easier to focus issues on segments of the industry and drive those forward so it doesn't lose interest, right? So you have the imaging board, and there's a set of issues that are very important to imaging companies that are unique from everyone else in the industry. And when you could get all the imaging leaders around a table and focused on it, and then put together a strategy around that and advance it with a team here, it helps us be effective. And then when we have the issue that matters to all of us, right, whether it's MDUFA or tax policy or dating back to medical device tax or tariffs, then you can bring the entire industry together to advocate on behalf of it. So, the way we've organized, I think, makes it easier. And the fundamental principle is the same. We're just stronger when we're all together under the same tent, right, telling the same story. And I think it benefits everyone. I also have a really, really unique board, right? And CEOs of all the major companies, largest companies in the world, mid-sized companies, smallest companies in the U.S., and every one of them sort of gets the first principle here, right, of working on behalf of the industry. Where we have common goals, where we have common policies, let's dig in on those and get those done. And then where we need to compete with each other, we'll compete with each other, right? In the business environment, right? Wherever it might be, let us go do our own thing. But when we're aligned together around big issues, they all get it and they're all in, and they're very, very focused on helping others be successful. Rising tide, right, lifts all boats, and I think they've bought into that. So I'm really fortunate to have a great board of CEOs around us.
All right. Well, and so I mean, when at this conference, obviously one thing your responsibility, I know you've got to get on stage and at least give some speeches and give some messages. What is going to be your kind of what is the most important message you want to deliver? What may be segmented to industry versus the public at large, but what is the key message you'd want someone to take away if they just remember one thing?
So I think I'm going to talk about the fact that we're living in unsettled times, that politically it's challenging, but we need to stay together, focused on our true why, what our true north is. And it's patients, right? And delivering product to patients that change people's lives. And policy drives that. And I'll talk about that a little bit, why policy matters. And I'll talk a little bit about, David, about working together with people you disagree with, right? A lot of people in our industry may agree, some may disagree with the president or Secretary Kennedy or whoever the leader of any department is. And I think the message to our industry is that's fine, right? But where we agree, let's make progress. And there is a lot of area that we can agree on. I think of making Americans healthy again, right? And we've done some work around that. I mean, that is our message. It's been our message for 50 years, as you mentioned earlier, from 1975 and on. Everything about what we do is making people healthy again. right? People who have fallen ill and getting them back to work and back to life, enjoying their families. So we'll talk about the impact we have on people's lives as well, and then call on folks, our leaders, to lead, right, and lead us to a place where we can agree and disagree and have meaningful dialogue. We can compete and compete fairly, and at the end of the day, help folks.
All right. Well, I think that sounds like a great place to leave it. I appreciate the time, as always.
You bet.
Yep. And I look forward to seeing you in San Diego in a few weeks.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Thanks for coming, and thanks for giving me a chance to talk on your podcast. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. Your support is valuable and makes us better. Please remember to leave a review and rate Market Pathways on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to listen.